It made for a jarring moment, too. Pat Smith, the mother of one of the Americans killed in Benghazi, gives gripping testimony about her son, Sean. But most of the Democrats at that hearing were not even there. They never came back into the chamber to hear these grieving family members speak.
Nobody from the government has gotten back to me to tell me anything. And I mean that by saying anything. And it's been, I hate to put it in the record, but it's been pure hell living through all this and not getting any answers. I wanted to be able to put everything beside me and have everything go away, but I can't do that.
Pat Smith was with us last week, and she is emotional every time she talks, her only son. Stephen Hayes, senior writer, Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor. Steve, good morning to you.
Morning, Bill.
What was behind the Democratic walkout or the failure to walk back in after break?
I cannot imagine, honestly. I have no idea. I think it was really bad form. Obviously, I think they owe it to her to at least be present, if not ask questions, or help her try to find answers to the questions that she still has more than a year after the attacks in Benghazi.
It's a remarkable thing to see the background when during the testimony of her and another gentleman we'll hear in a moment whose son was killed, because the room's empty. Daryl Issa sent out a picture by way of Twitter. And this shows about a half-filled room, which gives you the impression people were there. But you're saying this was the Republican side of the room?
Yeah, I think there were two Democrats remaining in the picture that Daryl Issa tweeted out. They sit on either side of the dais, and Republican side was mostly full. The Democratic side was mostly empty. Look, I mean, if you could say it's a metaphor for the way that people have approached this Benghazi hearing. If you go back to the substantive part of the hearing dealing with the ARB report, you had Democrats basically defending the ARB report, defending the administration, Republicans raising questions and appearing quite skeptical.
Yeah, why don't people cover this? You know, I mean, why don't Democrats care?
You know, I mean,
is this part of the whole phony scandal line? I mean, make
yeah,
sense of that.
I think that's right. I think for Democratic partisans, that's why. I mean, I think, you know, your first question really has me sort of befuddled. I don't know why people don't cover this. I mean, I have a theory. If you go back to the time right after the Benghazi attacks happened and the media decided, in effect, we're not going to cover this because we're in the middle of a political environment. This is a presidential election. We don't want this to be political. We don't think it's newsworthy. Many of them, I think, didn't want to ask tough questions of the Obama administration. And once you make that judgment that the story's not important at that time, covering it later, covering it now, suggests that you were wrong in that earlier judgment. Now, of course, I think they were wrong in that earlier judgment. And if you were watching the hearings yesterday, there was revelation after revelation after revelation about this ARB report, what was covered, what wasn't covered, the way that they operated, how independent they were or non-independent as the case may be.
They gave leading members of the State Department the chance to look at the report. They gave leading members of the State Department the chance to go ahead and point to people who were doing the investigation. Now, this is Charles Woods, the father of Tyrone Woods, what he had to say after his son was killed a year ago.
There are people out there that have firsthand knowledge, and public testimony is necessary. The voters need to have the truth about Benghazi so that the voters can protect the freedom of America. There is some conflict as to whether or not there was an order to stand down. There are very credible sources that say that Ty and 5 of his Special Forces workers were denied 3 times.
Well, those questions ring true for the past year because we've been asking those around here. What do you think ultimately this hearing showed? What did it prove?
Well, for 9 months, the Obama administration has been claiming that this ARB report was both independent and exhaustive. And what was very clear from the hearings yesterday and from depositions of the 2 leaders of that investigation earlier is that it was neither. It wasn't either independent nor exhaustive. As you mentioned, Bill, you had the leaders briefing the State Department leaders before this report came out. They were giving copies of the report earlier. Mike Mullen, the vice chairman of the panel, actually called Cheryl Mills, the chief of staff to Hillary Clinton, because he was concerned that another State Department official who was going to appear before Congress might not represent the State Department well. So he's in effect giving PR advice or a heads up at the same time he's supposed to be investigating these people. They also didn't look into things like the talking points, like why the video became such a central part of the Benghazi story. They didn't do a lot of the things that I think most Americans would have expected that they would have done, and what they did do, they weren't independent.
That leaves a lot of questions without answers. Quickly, what happens next then?
Well, Darrell Issa subpoenaed an additional 2 people who had information about the response that night. I think you have other committees, including the Intelligence Committee, looking to talk to the survivors. We still don't, at this date, a year later, have any firsthand accounts from the survivors, the CIA-affiliated personnel who were on the ground in Benghazi. I think we're going to start to get that.